Hi, welcome to Edward Box Guitar Tuition. So, got another classic album inspection for you. 30th anniversary today of Black Sabbath's Dehumanizer album, released 1992, June the 22nd. Just looking at the date there. So this is a funny one. This Black Sabbath, came back with Dio. At the time, normally that would be kind of, Dio's back. But I think it was a kind of marriage of sort of convenience a little bit. Basically, Dio had kind of had decreasing sales on the Dream Evil album, and then a Lock Up the Wolves, decreasing attendances. Sabbath, although they'd done well with the Hellas Cross album in Europe, the feeling was they would, shift more units if Dio was back, I guess. I'm just surmising here. So they got back together. Now, originally they were working with Cozy Powell on drums, but he hurt his pelvis in a horse riding accident. That was a drummer they could agree on, because of course Ronnie Dio had been in Rainbow with Cozy Powell. And then Ronnie Dio wanted to bring in Simon Wright to replace Cozy, who was on the Lock Up the Wolves album. But he got overruled by Tony and Geezy, who wanted Vinny Appice, obviously who'd done the Heaven and Hell Turn and Mob Rules album, superb. Seems strange that to think, why wouldn't Ronnie want Vinny Appice in when they'd done all that stuff together? But maybe there's some, disagreement there. I don't know. I've also read that later into recording, or when they were rehearsing, they did contact Tony Martin, which Ronnie James Dio obviously wasn't pleased about. So there's obviously ruptions while making this. It obviously wasn't totally happy camp. Apparently they spent a lot of money going backwards and forwards from the United States for recording, and that put up the price of the album, which would mean it would have trouble recouping. I'm guessing it sold about 500,000 copies worldwide. So not the level of the albums before. But then obviously eventual outcome of this was they were touring, they were playing kind of mid-sized venues in the UK, places like Manchester Apollo. I remember they played with Testament supporting, Hameo, stuff like that. So that was decent business. But they were supposed to play with Ozzy a gig on Ozzy's final gig, not that it was, and Dio refused to support Ozzy, which I kind of understand really, not putting the two eras together, and then Dio quit, and Rob Halford famously stepped in for the gig, and you can hear that on a bootlegs. Rob Halford also replaced Ozzy later on in Sabbath, so for a night, so pretty amazing. So that's a bit of the background to this. I didn't hear the album. I heard the album at the time. My brother had it. I kind of listened to. I just wasn't as into that kind of older metal at that point. Again, I've been into it when I was younger. At this point, I was still listening to hair bands, but I was going into that period in the 90s where it's like, well, what am I going to listen to? Because I fucking hated, what was coming out of Seattle and stuff like that. Not Queensrÿche, obviously. So the Sabbath seemed like a sort of step back, I suppose. But obviously, as time's gone on, we've got into like the heritage of classic rock and metal. So I finally got this album somewhere in the mid-noughties. So what's it like? I think it's a good record. It's really heavy. It's the heaviest album they ever did with Dio, one of the heaviest Sabbath albums, full stop. The production by Reinhold Mack, Queen fame's good. It's got massive drums, but not kind of what I just call massive natural drums. It's like they've been recorded in a big concrete room. It's not just whacked with reverb. Guitars are tight, apart from one little bit. Bass is fantastic, as you would expect. And Dio's doing a really aggressive vocal style, I think, to kind of keep pace with the change in music. And he would keep doing this. He would carry on with this on the Strange Highways album, the Dio album he did afterwards. Iommi's great as always. Obviously, Vinny Appice's drums are great. It's a solid record. It opens with Computer God, 6 minutes and 10 seconds. Really good opener. Not like one of the slower tracks, but not up tempo. But it's got a really cool middle section. It kind of breaks down to a nice picked bit. Really good, effective track. It's got a kind of long intro of 30 seconds. This was not that long. I think that's a little fault of the album. I've just go through this. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's about 5 songs that have 30-second intros. Pardon me. And if you cut those intros off, the album's 52 minutes long. We get it under 50 minutes. And sometimes the songs feel a little overdone. It would benefit from being a little more punchy, and that would get the arrangements down. But a lot of the intros have real atmosphere to them. But Computer God's a really cool opener. Then track 2, you've got After All. Now this is very doomy. It's very slow. I don't like this track as much, but it's good. It's still quality. 5 minutes 17. It's another really heavy track. All the band's playing really well. It's good. Then you got TV Crimes. So this is sort of the single off the album. I really like this track. It's the only track under 4 minutes. It's up tempo. I like Dio's lyrics. He's talking about TV evangelists, which is a typical subject matter for the time, but it's good to hear Dio doing more contemporary lyrics, which he does on this album. He leaves the fantasy behind, hence Computer God, and his warning about technology. But TV Crimes got a great chorus. Really like it. Really like the way it rolls off. Again, Iommi does a cool solo. It's got a Neon Night style solo. I'm just going to read notes there. Really like this track. Then you've got Letters from Earth. Again, another really heavy riff. Grinding sort of riffage, slow doom. Again, probably sort of like After All. Don't like as much as the other two, but it's a good track. This album's very consistent. Then you got Master Insanity. Now, this was the one track I didn't used to like. I was like, oh, it's Master Insanity. But when I listened the last couple of times recently, I really like this track. It's a little more up-tempo. Again, it has an intro, which is cool. It's got an odd timing. It's in a sort of a bar of 6/8, then it's kind of 4/4. I think is how I'd count it, but or 8/8 notes. But the intro reappears in the middle section, and that's something they do on the album. They'll use the intro, and that'll become the middle section, which is pretty cool. But again, if you cut the middle section, the track would be just over 5 minutes and not 5 minutes 54. But it's a really cool track. If you actually listen to Tony's guitar coming at the start, the double track is not quite tight, which is weird because the rest of the album is tight as fuck. But it's a good track. I really like it. Check my other notes. Yeah, it's got a kind of bit like Lady of the Lake by Rainbow, actually. It breaks down into the verse. It's got a really good bridge, which is in half time. So it's a really well crafted track, this. I guess that would finish the original side one if you had the vinyl. This came out, in the CD era of the early days, so it was probably pressed on vinyl. So side two was a Time Machine. This was used on Wayne's World 2 soundtrack. This is 4 minutes 10. It's one of the shorter tracks. Again, it's up tempo, a grinding riff. This is a cool track. Check notes. Nothing much to say about it. It's kind of like a TV Crimes vibe. After some of the doom and slower tunes, it's just what the album needs. Then you got Sins of the Father. This is kind of another slow track, but probably a bit more interesting than the other two that have gone before it. It's kind of got a drone type riff in the Mixolydian mode on probably the D and G string, but I'm not sure because I've not tried learning it. It's 4 minutes 43, so even though it's slow, it's a little shorter. I think it doubles up later on. It doubles up going towards the end solo and through the end section. It's a really good track, definitely one of the better tracks on the album. Then you've got the big production piece on the album, Too Late. I think this is really well crafted tracks. They've got that lovely Sign of the Southern Cross style intro, acoustic guitar. Again, it's got a kind of intro 30 seconds before that starts, and that would have been an opportunity to knock 30 seconds off and just get into the meat of things. But it's epic. Quite a cool middle section solo. Breaks back down. Ronnie does a really, really great vocal. Very good track. Kind of, like I said, the epic track on the album. Then I think you've got what is the best track. And I think if I've got a criticism of the album, is it lacks a truly classic track, but this one, which is would be the one you could stick on Mob Rules or Heaven and Hell, alongside the classic tracks, I think. I mean, there's tracks on this album that you might say are better than Slipping Away or Country Girl or Walk Away. Yeah, there is. But there's not tracks that come up to the standard of Heaven and Hell or Neon Nights. But I think I's in that wheelhouse. Again, you could cut the intro. It's a cool intro though. Again, that's, would whack 30 seconds off. But it's got a grinding riff. I saw them play this live, so when they toured as Heaven and Hell in 2007, this was... I can't remember if they played Computer God. I haven't checked the set list, but this was certainly the one track they played off Dehumanizer. It went down really well. And my middle brother doesn't have the album, and he mentioned, that track I was brilliant. And they did Shadow of the Wind as well, off Black Sabbath, the Dio years. And these two tracks fit perfectly with the other classic tracks they played, the four off the Heaven and Hell and the fourth the Mob Rules that they did that night. So it's an excellent track, great grinding riff. And then you've got finishes off with Buried Alive. This is probably the heaviest, not only the heaviest track on the album, it's one of the heaviest songs they've ever done. A bit more up tempo, grinding. Kind of, this is the track that's kind of competing, knocking on the door of what's going on in metal. I mean, it's got a heavy sort of you know, so it's touching with Pantera, Metallica, Slayer, the kind of the post-thrash stuff, but you know, it's not thrashy. Dio does a really angry vocal, but it's got a really melodic chorus. And he it's a nice counterpoint on that. It's a really cool track. I mean, an example of another really evil heavy track would be Follow the Tears off The Devil You Know, and that anniversary we'll celebrate eventually. Do I prefer this album to The Devil You Know? I think it's more consistent. When The Devil You Know is good, I think it's got more melody and a little more of the past sound. You know, like I said about this album, it's a little bit too long. They could have trimmed some arrangements. I like production, it's a bit harsh, it's just for quite aggressive and angry, a bit doomy at times, but it's a good record, there's not a bad track on it. It's consistent. I mean, if someone came up to me on his own merits and gave it a 9 out of 10, 8.5 out of 10, I wouldn't disagree, but compared to Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, like a classic, I'd still give it an 8. You know, it's too... at the time, it made 28 in the UK, 44 in the US. I think it had pretty reasonable sales, but back then you can't be selling 300,000, 500,000 albums. You need to be selling 1 million. And obviously, there's probably already problems because of the money they spent on the album. And, you know, it's that beginning of that period, this, where it's just so difficult for the classic metal acts. You know, Maiden are going to have trouble. Sabbath are. What they call Priest, you know, Halford Lee's. The one artist who didn't is Ozzy. You know, at this point, Ozzy's on the back of one of his biggest albums, No More Tears, and then Osmosis does pretty good. And he does the Osbournes, and he's always been there. You know, much to probably Dio Sabbath era is charging, but it's one of those things. You know, Dio Sabbath at his peak would probably only sell half what or 70% of what Osbourne Sabbath did, and this, you know, would be less so. But it's a really good record, not a great cover, not kind of, I know, not sophisticated enough for me. But anyway, Dehumanizer's 30 years old. It's that long since Dio went back to Sabbath the first time. Who'd have thought it? But cheers. Just one thing I missed is recorded at Rockfield Studios as well. So, famous studio where Savings of Destiny was recorded, and Night of the Opera by Queen, so... there we go. Okay, cheers, thanks for checking out. Remember to share and subscribe. Cheers.